Do you remember those ridiculous fads from the 1970s? The ones that burned bright, then failed miserably? These funny fads filled stores, schools, and living rooms for a heartbeat before disappearing in embarrassment. Looking back now, do we laugh at them or at ourselves for believing in them? In the 1970s, someone decided garbage needed to be glamorous. Designer trash bags hit the shelves, promising households a chic upgrade to an otherwise smelly task. These bags came in neon colors, stripes, florals, even psychedelic swirls, like a disco floor for your trash can. The ads showed smiling families carrying out trash in style, as if hauling potato peels and coffee grounds in polka dots made it any better. But here was the catch. They tore the second you filled them. A bag of leftovers? Ripped. A few empty cans? Split wide open. Garbage spilled across driveways in a rainbow mess, leaving parents furious at having spent good money on a worse product. Kids laughed at the absurdity, nothing like watching dad chase orange peels rolling downhill in a bag decorated with daisies. Still, some people bought into the hype. They matched their avocado green kitchens with equally modern trash decor, convinced this was the future of homemaking. Magazines even praised them as functional fashion, though most consumers knew better after 1 week. By the end of the fad, most folks returned to sturdy black or brown bags, grateful for durability over disco flair. Today, designer trash bags live on only in jokes about just how far the 1970s pushed style into everyday life. Do you remember dragging a patterned bag to the curb, only to watch it collapse before you even made it to the street? The shower radio was supposed to be genius. Imagine stepping into the steam with your favorite disco tunes blaring while you shampooed. In the 1970s, these radios were marketed as waterproof miracles, small enough to hang on the shower head, futuristic enough to make every morning feel like a concert. The ads promised crystal clear sound and convenience like never before. Reality was less impressive. The plastic cases fogged up after 2 showers, condensation sneaked inside, and batteries corroded in record time. Static overtook the songs, leaving you singing along to Fuzz instead of the Bee Gees. And when water really got in, sparks, smoke, or silence. Kids thought it was cool for about 5 minutes, blasting local stations while pretending to be rock stars behind the curtain. Parents groaned when yet another set of batteries was ruined. Most ended up on bathroom counters, never hung in showers again. Some brands tried to upgrade by making clunkier waterproof boxes, but by then the fad was already circling the drain. Homeowners realized singing in the shower was just fine without technology risking electrocution. Today, waterproof Bluetooth speakers finally do what those shower radios never could. But back then, it was just another overhyped gadget that fizzled out fast. Do you remember twisting the tuner with wet fingers, desperate to catch a song before the static swallowed it whole? Few fads screamed 1970s louder than the custom van craze. Vans became rolling canvases of expression, painted with wizards, lightning bolts, or sunsets. Interiors decked out with shag carpets, bead curtains, and yes, sometimes lava lamps glued to the dashboard. It was freedom on 4 wheels, marketed as the ultimate hangout spot for young dreamers. The truth? They were ovens on wheels. In summer heat, shag carpeting smelled like wet dog, vinyl seats stuck to your thighs, and all that extra junk rattled non-stop. Lava lamps tipped over, leaving goo smeared on the dashboard. And the fuzzy dice? They blocked more vision than they decorated. Gas shortages and practicality finally killed the craze. Nobody wanted to haul a van that guzzled gallons of fuel just to look like a mobile rec room. By the 1980s, most vans returned to being utility vehicles, stripped of their wizard murals and shag walls. Today, surviving custom vans are collector novelties, but for many, they remain a sweaty memory of excess. Do you remember sliding open a van door, greeted by wall-to-wall carpet and the smell of burnt vinyl in the summer sun? Roller rinks were already a fever dream of disco lights and loud music, but the 1970s decided kids needed to look the part too. Enter the disco roller outfits. Shiny polyester jumpsuits, often in metallic colors with glittery belts or sequins. Kids twirled on the rink floor looking like tiny backup dancers for Donna Summer. Ads pitched them as the height of roller chic. The problem? Polyester does not breathe. After 2 laps, kids were drenched, sweat glued fabric to their skin, and glitter rubbed off on everything. Parents tried to peel jumpsuits off crying kids like plastic wrap. And worse, polyester was flammable, a hazard when kids blew out birthday candles in their flashy outfits. Still, for the brief moment before exhaustion, kids felt like stars. Families snapped photos of glowing rinks filled with mini disco dancers in rainbow outfits. But once reality hit, those outfits ended up at the bottom of closets, never worn again. Manufacturers moved on quickly, realizing no parent wanted to spend money on clothes that doubled as a sauna. Roller skating itself stayed cool, but the glittery jumpsuit fad failed miserably. Today, those photos survive as hilarious reminders of how fashion tortured kids in the name of fun. Do you remember skating in a polyester suit, praying no one saw the sweat stains spreading under the lights? No fad is more synonymous with the 1970s than avocado green and harvest gold appliances. Refrigerators, ovens, dishwashers, every kitchen glowed in these earthy tones. Magazines called them warm, welcoming colors, meant to bring nature indoors. Homeowners rushed to redecorate, convinced avocado green was modern chic. But trends change. By the 1980s, people were stuck with giant refrigerators in swamp green, ovens that looked like mustard jars, and dishwashers that clashed with everything. Real estate ads even listed avocado kitchen as a drawback. Families groaned as they lived surrounded by colors that now felt more like punishment than fashion. Kids teased that the appliances looked moldy or rusty. Guests politely pretended it was stylish while secretly hating every shade. And replacing them? Too expensive. So people lived with their avocado nightmares for decades. Eventually, stainless steel and neutral tones took over, leaving harvest gold behind as a punchline. Appliance companies quietly moved on, pretending they had never encouraged the madness. Today, those appliances pop up in vintage kitchens, admired ironically, but remembered bitterly by those who lived with them. Do you remember staring at a green fridge, wondering why anyone thought it looked appetizing? In the mid-1970s, thanks to movies like Smokey and the Bandit, Citizens Band radios became the must-have gadget. Everyone, from suburban dads to teenagers, grabbed a CB and learned the lingo. Suddenly, folks who had never driven a truck were saying "Breaker 19" and giving themselves call signs. It was like social media on static-filled airwaves. For a while, it was fun. Kids used them like walkie-talkies, parents eavesdropped on strangers, and everyone thought they were part of some secret club. But the novelty wore off fast. Too many people crowded the channels. Conversations devolved into nonsense, and the slang became a parody of itself. Soon, the fad collapsed under its own noise. Radios gathered dust in garages, their antennas bent and forgotten. Only truckers kept them alive, while regular folks quietly moved on. Still, the craze left its mark. For a few years, even PTA meetings and backyard barbecues had people throwing around CB handles like they were in on a joke. Today, CBS still exist, but mostly as tools, not toys. Do you remember families huddled around, laughing as Dad said, "Copy that," into a box that no one needed? Inflatable furniture looked futuristic in the 1970s. Clear couches, chairs, even beds filled with air promised a hip, modern vibe for cheap. Magazines praised them as portable, stylish, and perfect for dorm rooms or groovy apartments. They seemed like the perfect blend of design and affordability. The reality was less glamorous. Sitting down made loud squeaks, every movement stuck sweaty skin to plastic, and one wrong step sent you crashing to the floor. Air pumps broke, seams ripped, and patches failed. Within weeks, your modern lounge was a flat puddle of vinyl. Kids loved bouncing on them, turning them into makeshift trampolines until they burst. Parents hated them, calling them junk that cluttered living rooms. Yet for a moment, inflatable furniture felt like you owned a piece of the future. Eventually, practicality won. Nobody wanted to constantly patch holes or replace furniture that could not handle a cat's claw. By the end of the decade, inflatable furniture was more joke than innovation. Today, it pops up at novelty shops, but mostly as a gag gift. Do you remember sinking into a squeaky plastic couch, pretending it was comfortable while sweat glued you in place? Before surround sound, there was quadrophonic sound, marketed as the next revolution in home audio. 4 speakers instead of 2, immersive listening, and records designed to blow your mind. Companies promised music would never sound the same again. Audiophiles rushed to buy expensive systems, convinced they were on the cutting edge. But it was confusing. Different brands used different formats, none of them compatible. Records cost a fortune, setups were clunky, and most living rooms had no space for 4 speakers. Instead of revolution, it was chaos. Listeners strained to notice any difference beyond louder. Families argued over wires snaking across carpets. And when records skipped, the whole illusion broke. By the mid-1970s, quadrophonic was dead. Stereo returned as the standard, leaving buyers with overpriced gear no one wanted. Stores cleared shelves, quietly burying the fad. Today, surround sound finally delivers what quadrophonic promised. But back then, it was just hype. Do you remember staring at 4 giant speakers, wondering why it still sounded like a regular record? Polaroids were already revolutionary, but the 1970s tried to push them further with instant gimmicks. New models promised faster development, sharper images, and easier handling. Families snapped them up, excited to skip the wait and get perfect photos instantly. Except instant often meant instantly bad. Pictures came out blurry, colors washed out, and faces lost in glare. Film was expensive, so every bad shot hurt wallets as well as memories. Parents grumbled as kids wasted film-snapping pets or ceilings by mistake. Some cameras jammed, spitting out half-exposed film. Others developed so poorly you could barely tell who was in the picture. Instead of joy, they became jokes. Polaroid still thrived, but the overhyped models failed miserably. People kept their older, reliable versions and ignored the gimmicks. The fad burned out quickly, leaving only piles of wasted film. Today, instant cameras are back in style, but they work far better. Do you remember waiting eagerly for a photo only to realize you paid for a ghostly blur? Before VHS, families treasured their 8mm home movies. Portable viewers were marketed as the way to relive those memories anytime. Tiny machines you could set on a table, threading reels for instant playback. Ads showed smiling families watching vacations at dinner. Reality was jammed film, dim light, and constant frustration. The reels tangled, bulbs burned out, and focus knobs never quite worked. Instead of sharing memories, parents cursed while kids groaned. Even when they worked, the images were tiny and blurry. Families squinted, leaning over machines that whirred and clicked, sounding like they were about to explode. By the time VHS arrived, portable viewers were already obsolete. Nobody missed them. They became garage sale regulars, abandoned like forgotten science experiments. Today, the idea seems laughable, especially with every phone storing movies instantly. Do you remember sitting at the table, waiting for Dad to fix yet another jammed reel before the vacation footage even started? In the 1970s, no wardrobe felt complete without some kind of puka shell or seed bead jewelry dangling from your neck or wrist. The look screamed laid-back beach cool, even if you had never seen an ocean in your life. Cheap versions flooded drugstores and gift shops, promising California surfer vibes for less than $1. Kids wore them to school, teens wore them on dates, and even adults tried to pass off the fragile beads as bohemian chic. The problem? They broke constantly. A necklace lasted about a week before scattering beads all over the classroom floor. The stretchy string snapped, seed beads rolled into heating vents, and pukas ended up swept into the trash. Parents grew tired of replacing the trend every weekend. Still, for those few days before disaster struck, people felt fashionable. Photos of the era are filled with beaded chokers, half-strangled wrists, and smiles wide enough to pretend the jewelry was worth it. Even if the fad failed on durability, it succeeded in defining an unmistakable 1970s look. Today, Puka shells resurface as ironic throwbacks, but the cheap versions are remembered more for their fragility than their fashion. Do you remember tugging at a seed bead bracelet, knowing one wrong pull would send beads flying across the room? The smiley face craze of the 1970s was unstoppable. It appeared on buttons, posters, stickers, and eventually the unlikeliest of places, bathrooms. Smiley face soap promised cheer in the shower, molded into bright yellow grins that sat on sinks like candy. And yes, smiley face toilet paper was sold, printed with grinning faces on every sheet, meant to turn bathroom breaks into positive moments. But soap did not lather properly, and the grin quickly smeared into a creepy yellow blob. Worse, the toilet paper was rough, scratchy, and far from comforting. The novelty wore off fast, leaving families with rolls that felt more like sandpaper than sunshine. Kids laughed at the absurdity, joking about wiping away smiles. Adults quietly regretted spending real money on a gimmick that literally went down the drain. Like many 1970s fads, it burned bright, then embarrassed those who bought in. The smiley face survived the decade, but bathroom products became a cautionary tale about taking a trend too far. Today, it sounds more like a parody than a product, yet it was real. Do you remember spotting a yellow grin on the sink or worse, on the toilet roll? Before tanning beds and spray tans, the 1970s pushed sun lamps as the secret to a golden glow without stepping outside. These lamps promised safe indoor tanning, letting you bronze while flipping through magazines in your living room. They became hot sellers, marketed as glamorous shortcuts to year-round sunshine. Reality was painful. The bulbs burned skin quickly, leaving people lobster red after only a few minutes. The smell of overheated plastic filled rooms, and worse, dermatologists later revealed the lamps caused more harm than good. Families joked about the lamps turning you into bacon. Teens still flocked to them, determined to copy the beachy California look even from snowy suburbs. Parents shrugged, assuming a little indoor sunshine was harmless. Meanwhile, sales soared until the side effects became impossible to ignore. By the 1980s, sun lamps were infamous for burns and health risks, shoved into closets and yard sales. The fad collapsed as quickly as it rose, replaced by new safe tanning gimmicks that were not much better. Today, sun lamps feel more like torture devices than beauty aids. Do you remember sitting under one, convinced your glowing skin was worth the sting and smell? In the 1970s, convenience was everything, and kitchen companies rushed to invent miracle gadgets for busy households. One of the strangest was the electric salad shooter, a device meant to make chopping vegetables easier than ever. Just drop produce in the top and out came perfectly sliced salad. In theory. In practice, these noisy machines jammed constantly, spraying half-cut veggies across counters. Worse, they had a habit of nicking fingers if you dared push too hard. Parents grumbled that knives worked better, faster, and with fewer trips to the emergency room. Still, the ads showed smiling moms proudly pouring shredded carrots and cucumbers into bowls. People wanted to believe in the convenience, and for a brief time, salad shooters found their way into kitchens nationwide. But their clunky design and constant cleanup meant most ended up gathering dust. By the end of the decade, they were more punchline than progress, another gadget shoved to the back of a cupboard. Today, modern food processors do the job right, but the salad shooter remains a relic of failed innovation. Do you remember watching carrots fly across the kitchen, wondering if dinner was even salvageable? The idea of turning ordinary rocks into sparkling gems thrilled kids in the 1970s. Rock tumbler kits promised treasure-making magic. Drop in some stones, wait a few weeks, and out came shiny jewels ready for jewelry. Ads made it look like science and treasure hunting rolled into one. The reality was disappointing. Tumblers roared like lawnmowers, grinding loudly in basements for days on end. When kids opened them, the results were more gravel than gemstones. Instead of sparkling emeralds, they got dull, scratched rocks no one wanted. Still, the promise kept kids hopeful. They tried again and again, waiting for that miracle load that never arrived. Parents grew annoyed at the noise, secretly shutting machines off at night. Eventually, the kits became dust collectors, abandoned in garages and closets. The fad faded as kids realized polished rocks were less fun than advertised. Today, rock tumblers survive as science fair gimmicks, but never as the miracle hobby they were sold to be. Do you remember pouring out a drum of dusty pebbles, pretending they looked just like jewels? Carnivals in the 1970s loved selling cheap novelties, and the walking bird was one of the most popular. Shiny plastic birds balanced on little beaks and feet, supposedly able to walk down ramps or strings. They looked magical in demonstrations, drawing kids to beg for them. At home, the magic fell apart. Birds toppled over after 2 steps, cracked when dropped, and often lost balance completely. Parents muttered about wasting money, while kids tried in vain to recreate the carnival trick. Some kids managed to get a few slow walks, enough to show friends before the bird's legs snapped. Others used them as decorations, sitting uselessly on shelves. Like many carnival toys, the birds were more hype than play. They littered toy boxes across America, forgotten as quickly as they were bought. Today, the walking bird survives mostly in nostalgia, remembered for its promise more than its performance. Do you remember setting one at the top of a ramp, cheering as it wobbled 3 inches before collapsing? Comic books in the 1970s were filled with irresistible ads for X-ray specs. The illustration showed boys seeing through hands, walls, even clothing. For a few dollars mailed away, kids imagined themselves superheroes of vision. The package arrived, and excitement vanished. Inside were cardboard glasses with blurry spirals that made everything look like shadows. They did not see through anything, except kids' allowances. Still, children wore them proudly, convinced if they squinted hard enough the magic would appear. Friends laughed, tried them on, and realized everyone had been duped. Parents rolled their eyes, muttering about scams. Despite the failure, X-ray specs became a cultural joke. They were proof of how gullible kids could be when ads promised the impossible. Today, they remain symbols of comic book-era scams, funnier than they were functional. Do you remember sliding on those cheap glasses, convinced for 1 second they might actually work? Kids of the 1970s were sold dreams of raising sea creatures in their own bedrooms. Kits promised live seahorses, prehistoric monsters, or magical pets that would thrive in bowls of tap water. The boxes showed colorful underwater worlds bursting with life. Reality was disappointing. Most kits contained only dried brine shrimp eggs. Once hatched, they floated like specks, barely visible and often dead within days. Instead of sea creatures, kids stared at bowls of cloudy water. Still, for a few moments, kids believed in the magic. They named their specks, watched them wiggle, and bragged to friends. But soon the bowls were dumped, the pets forgotten. Parents groaned at spending money on murky science experiments. The fad fizzled quickly, leaving kids skeptical of instant pets ever again. Today, those kits live on only as punchlines, remembered for their false promises. Do you remember peering into a glass bowl, wondering if your sea monster had drowned before it even hatched? The 1970s saw the rise of self-watering gadgets, none stranger than the plant globe. These glass orbs claimed to deliver water slowly, keeping houseplants alive without effort. Ads called them revolutionary plant care, perfect for busy families. But the globes over-delivered. Instead of gently moistening soil, they flooded pots, drowning roots, and turning plants into soggy messes. Families watched beloved ferns wilt faster than ever. Still, people wanted to believe. They kept buying replacements, convinced they had simply used them wrong. By the third dead plant, most realized the gadgets were worthless. Like so many 1970s innovations, they ended up in closets, forgotten with other broken promises. Gardeners quietly went back to watering cans. Today, plant globes are remembered more for killing plants than saving them. Do you remember pulling up a drowned houseplant, muttering that the globe was supposed to help? The 1970s loved pushing boundaries, even in ice cream. Companies rolled out novelty flavors like beer, pickle, ketchup, tomato sorbet, and garlic. Ads promised adventurous tastes for a new generation of daring eaters. The results were unappetizing. Families bought them once for curiosity, took one bite, and shoved them to the back of freezers. Kids spit them out, parents grimaced, and dinner guests politely declined seconds. Some flavors even stank, making entire kitchens smell like vinegar or onions. Ice cream was supposed to be fun, sweet, creamy, comforting. Instead, it became a punchline. Within a year, most novelty flavors vanished from shelves. Classic chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry reclaimed their thrones. Today, they resurface as oddities on foodie blogs, but for the 1970s, they were proof that not every experiment worked. Do you remember staring at a bowl of pickle ice cream, wondering why anyone thought this was dessert? If you grew up in the 1970s, chances are you visited at least one home where the couch was covered in thick, clear plastic. The idea was to preserve the nice furniture for special occasions, keeping it clean and fresh for years to come. From afar, it gave the living room a polished look, as if the sofa had just been delivered from the store. Families who wanted to show off their sense of style proudly left the plastic on, believing it was the ultimate in sophistication. But actually sitting on one was another story. In the summer, legs stuck like glue, peeling off with a sticky sound whenever you stood up. The plastic squeaked and groaned with every movement, turning family movie nights into a noisy ordeal. Kids slid right off cushions, while pets avoided the slippery surface altogether. Even worse, the protectors often cracked or yellowed over time, making expensive couches look worse than if they had just been left uncovered. Guests politely pretended they were comfortable, while secretly counting the minutes until they could get up. Still, plastic couch protectors were everywhere for a while, a testament to the 1970s obsession with protecting investments. Families convinced themselves they were being practical, even as they sweated through sticky conversations in the living room. Today, they survive mostly as jokes in sitcoms and stand-up comedy routines, proof of how style and comfort sometimes clashed in spectacular ways. Do you remember peeling your legs off a plastic-covered cushion, wondering why your family even owned a couch no one could enjoy? The self-help craze of the 1970s did not stop at books and seminars. It made its way onto vinyl. Companies sold subliminal records, promising that if you played them while you slept, they would reprogram your subconscious. Want to lose weight? Get rich? Quit smoking? All you needed to do was let an LP whisper affirmations you could not actually hear. The concept sounded futuristic, like something out of science fiction. But in practice, most of the records were filled with faint static, tinny music, and the occasional eerie whisper that made people more uneasy than enlightened. Many listeners swore they heard voices telling them to eat dessert or spend money instead of saving it. Families dutifully played the records at night, hoping to wake up transformed. Instead, they woke up cranky from poor sleep, annoyed that their investment had done nothing. People joked that the only thing they lost was the cash they spent on the record. Despite the failure, the fad lasted long enough to inspire countless gimmicks, tapes, 8-tracks, even radio programs that claimed to deliver hidden success. None of it worked, of course, but hope kept people buying. Today, subliminal records live on as quirky collectibles, more novelty than miracle. Do you remember lying in bed, listening to faint whispers through static, convinced your life would change by morning? The 1970s loved combining fads, and nothing proved it better than disco exercise records. These albums promised to turn weight loss into a party, blasting disco beats while instructors shouted dance moves. Instead of going to the gym, you could just clear a space in your living room, drop the needle, and boogie yourself thin. For a moment, it felt brilliant. The music was infectious, the moves were flashy, and people believed they had found the secret to effortless fitness. Housewives in polyester leotards, teenagers in bell-bottoms, and even dads gave it a try. Living rooms turned into makeshift dance studios filled with clumsy spins and awkward jumps. The reality, though, was less glamorous. Without guidance, people twisted ankles, pulled backs, and slipped on shag carpet. The records offered little more than repetitive steps shouted over bass lines. Sweat poured, energy faded, and most participants ended up sprawled on the couch instead of dancing their way slim. Despite the failures, the fad sold surprisingly well, with record labels pumping out dozens of disco workout albums. By the 1980s, they were quickly overshadowed by aerobics videos that at least showed you how to move safely. Today, disco exercise records survive as kitschy reminders of when music and fitness collided in the strangest way. Do you remember trying to grapevine across a carpeted living room, only to collapse in a heap of polyester and exhaustion? In the 1970s, alternative medicine found its way into nearly every fad, and magnetic healing bracelets were one of the most infamous. Advertised as miracle cures, these bracelets supposedly used magnetic fields to realign energy, reduce pain, and improve circulation. For just a few dollars, you could wear science on your wrist. People bought them by the millions, convinced they were harnessing invisible powers. Ads claimed the magnets worked like ancient medicine combined with modern technology. For a while, folks swore they felt relief, whether from the bracelet or just wishful thinking. But the problems appeared quickly. The bracelets rusted, stained skin green, or snapped under daily use. Doctors dismissed them as nonsense, and studies revealed they did little more than sit there. Families realized their miracle cure was just cheap metal. Still, many clung to them, convinced they just needed more time. Some people even wore multiple bracelets, stacking them up their arms like magical armor. Eventually, they all ended up rattling around in junk drawers or sold at garage sales for pennies. Today, magnetic bracelets still pop up from time to time, but the fad of the 1970s is remembered more for false hope than healing. Do you remember tugging a rusty bracelet off your wrist, wondering if you had just paid for a scam? The 8-track craze of the 1970s brought with it a slew of accessories, and one of the strangest was the cleaning cartridge. These devices claimed to clean dust and grime from players, extending the life of your music collection. Just pop one in, press play, and let it work its magic. Except the magic often destroyed the very tapes people wanted to save. Cleaning cartridges jammed inside machines, tangled with belts, and left players worse than before. Some even snapped mechanisms outright, forcing owners to toss their expensive players. For a while, though, they sold well. People desperately wanted to preserve their collections of Fleetwood Mac, Bee Gees, and Elton John. Cleaning cartridges looked like a solution, and who could resist saving their favorite songs with one simple gadget? But complaints piled up. Friends warned each other to avoid them. Stores quietly pulled them from shelves, and 8-track enthusiasts learned the hard way that elbow grease worked better than gadgets. By the end of the decade, cleaning cartridges were a punchline, remembered for ruining more music than they saved. Today, collectors laugh at how quickly people fell for the gimmick. Do you remember sliding one in, holding your breath, and then hearing the awful crunch of your player breaking? Television antenna adjustments were part of the evening routine, just like brushing your teeth or fighting over the remote. Before streaming, before digital signals, there were rabbit ears, 2 shiny rods that stood on top of the television like alien feelers. Getting a clear picture meant twisting them in random directions, adjusting one while the other stayed stubbornly out of reach. Sometimes you needed to stand on one foot. Sometimes the only way to get the signal was to hold the antenna yourself and stay there, frozen, arm extended, human satellite. Someone from the couch would yell, "Right there! Do not move!" and you would stay stuck in position, sacrificing comfort for clarity. Foil was added for better reception. Coat hangers became tools of innovation. And if the weather was bad, good luck. The static would return like an uninvited guest. It was frustrating, yes, but it was also communal. Families worked together to solve the mystery of the fuzzy screen. You cheered when the picture came in. You groaned when it disappeared mid-show. Antenna adjustments were the dance of analog television. Awkward, unpredictable, and always a little magical when they actually worked. Reliance on government assistance programs was not a choice. It was the only way to get by. Food stamps came in paper booklets, torn out in the checkout line with quiet hands and sideways glances. School lunches were free, but they came with their own kind of price. Standing in a separate line, hearing the whispers, seeing the looks. You carried a different card, a different meal, a different kind of burden. The people behind the counter never said anything. But you knew. Everyone knew. At home, government cheese filled the fridge. Powdered milk sat on the shelf. The pantry was stocked with cans stamped from surplus stores, beans, peanut butter, cereal that tasted like cardboard but kept you full. Your parents made it stretch. They made it work. And they told you to hold your head up, even when you wished you could vanish. Because pride does not feed a family. Assistance was not shameful. It was survival. It was how your shoes fit, how your stomach was full, how you still made it to class with something in your bag. And though some days it felt heavy, it also meant someone, somewhere, knew you were worth helping. Even when the world made you forget. Taping songs off the radio was a sacred mission. You would sit for hours next to your boombox, finger hovering over the record button, praying that the next song would be the one. And when it was, you had one shot to catch it clean, no static, no interruptions, and above all, no DJ talking over the intro. But of course, they always did. The opening notes would hit, your heart would race, and just as you hit record, that was the latest from Madonna. Coming up next, we've got... And just like that, your perfect mixtape moment was ruined. You would yell at the radio like the DJ could hear you. Why? Why do you do this to me? It was a battle of timing and nerves. Some kids got sneaky and recorded during the night shift when the hosts were quieter. Others became masters of timing, predicting when the chorus would drop, when the ad break would hit. It took real skill. And even if you missed a few seconds of the intro, you still labeled the tape like it was gold. You were not just building a playlist, you were capturing a moment. Free music, sure, but earned through effort, patience, and pure willpower. And if you were serious about your song collection, you were not stopping at one track. You were building an entire soundscape, one emotional banger at a time. Before there were curling wands, flat irons, and hair straighteners with 10 settings, there was one holy grail of home beauty, the built-in hairdryer chair. That is right, just like the ones at the salon. These were dome-shaped dryers, fixed right into vanities or dressing tables, and they were everything. Sit down, flip a switch, and suddenly your head was enveloped in a low hum of warm air. These machines were especially popular in the 1950s and 1960s when hairstyles like the beehive or the bouffant required serious volume and serious time. The dryers were sleek, futuristic, and a little noisy, but they got the job done. Housewives would sit under them while flipping through magazines, sipping coffee, or catching up on the neighborhood gossip. Some units were even foldable, tucking away neatly when not in use. Today, we think of beauty appliances as portable and handheld. But back then, hair care was an event, and the home adapted accordingly. These built-in dryer chairs turned the average bathroom into a personal beauty parlor. Sadly, they went the way of Aquanet and home perms. But speaking of gossip, let us head into the hallway because the next stop is where stories were shared, secrets were spilled, and teenage hearts skipped a beat. Hitchhiking to the mall was a legitimate transportation method in the 1970s. Teens and even younger kids stuck their thumbs out on the side of the road, confident that some friendly stranger would stop. Parents rarely worried, and kids bragged about how quickly they caught a ride. Sometimes rides came from neighbors, other times from total strangers. But nobody blinked. Groups of kids piled into the back seat of beat-up sedans, chattering the whole way to the mall. Drivers rarely asked questions. Sometimes they gave advice, sometimes just a smile. Radios blasted rock and roll while cigarette smoke curled through the windows. Kids swapped stories about the coolest rides they'd gotten, turning it into a badge of honor. Police cars even passed by without stopping, assuming hitchhiking was just part of daily life. Looking back, the risks were everywhere, but nobody thought twice about it. Some drivers smoked, some blasted the radio, and kids thought it was the height of adventure. Hitchhiking was seen as a practical solution, not a risk. Stories of kids getting into trouble existed, but most brushed them off as just rumors. It was a blend of trust and naivety that would horrify parents today. Stories of danger existed, but most brushed them off as rare exceptions. For kids without cars or bus money, hitchhiking was simply how you got where you needed to go. Looking back, it seems reckless, but in the 70s, it was normal, and everyone remembers it. Giant scrunchies were not just hair ties, they were statements. Big, bold, and often made of velvet or shiny satin, they wrapped around ponytails like fabric donuts. One was never enough. Some girls stacked them, others coordinated them with earrings, shirts, or shoelaces. You might even wear one on your wrist, just in case your hair needed managing at a moment's notice. They came in every color of the rainbow and every pattern imaginable. Leopard print? Check. Neon green? Of course. Polka dots the size of your thumb? Why not? Scrunchies were soft, gentle on your hair, and perfect for the sky-high ponytails the 1980s demanded. Some had sequins, some had bows. All of them made your hair look like it was ready to host a party. You could spot a scrunchie from across the school cafeteria. It bounced when you walked and made even the messiest bun look intentional. Looking back, they seem oversized and silly, but that was the point. Scrunchies were playful, practical, and loud in the best possible way. And even though they disappeared for a while, anyone who wore one back then knows, you never really outgrow the joy of tossing your hair into a cloud of fabric. Shared bedrooms among siblings meant privacy was a myth and bedtime was an adventure. 2, sometimes 3 kids in one room, bunk beds, fold-out couches, mattresses on the floor. You learned to sleep through snoring, giggling, and whispered arguments over who stole the blanket. One lamp lit the room. One drawer held everyone's socks. If you wanted quiet, you closed your eyes and hoped for sleep. But there was love there too. Late-night stories, secret jokes, a flashlight under the covers. You made forts out of sheets and built walls with pillows, pretending they were rooms of your own. You learned to share without thinking, to wait your turn, to keep secrets. Sure, you fought. You drew invisible lines down the mattress. But you also looked out for each other, listened when someone cried, celebrated the nights when no one got in trouble. Those cramped quarters built closeness you never asked for, but maybe needed. And years later, you remembered those rooms not for the lack of space, but for the way they held you together. Shared bedrooms were loud, messy, and full of life. And even now, you sometimes miss what it meant to fall asleep beside someone who knew you by heart. You had not lived until you beat the Oregon Trail without dying of dysentery. That was the holy grail of 1980s computer gaming. Those chunky gray computers in the school lab, that pixelated map, that relentless text box reminding you that little Timothy had broken a leg and your oxen just drowned crossing a river. Iconic. It was not just a game, it was survival. You learned real-life lessons in that pixel wilderness, like how much meat you could carry back from a hunt, not much, or why you should never try to ford a river without thinking it through. And somehow, we were totally into it. The green and black graphics, the clunky keyboard, the fact that it felt like schoolwork but kind of fun. You would all huddle around one screen, a group of 5 kids making group decisions like mini pioneers, and somehow it felt like the fate of your wagon family actually mattered. It was your first taste of choices in gaming, your first little moral dilemmas. Do you trade clothing for bullets? Do you rest for 2 days? Or do you push on and risk everyone freezing to death? Still, once the school bell rang, it was game over. And if you wanted to know what was playing in theaters that weekend, you did not Google it. You picked up the phone. Once upon a time, you did not just decorate your bathroom, you committed to it. We are talking full-color, floor-to-ceiling, single-shade devotion. Pastel pink, mint green, baby blue, or the ever-famous avocado, these were the color-coordinated bathroom suites of the 1950s through the 1970s. And when we say coordinated, we mean everything. The toilet, the tub, the sink, the tile, sometimes even the toilet paper, matched like a showroom display. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower helped popularize the trend with what people dubbed Mamie Pink. Entire homes were built with these candy-colored palettes baked into their bones. But of course, color trends change. What once looked stylish and luxurious now feels a bit like stepping into a cartoon. As minimalism took hold in the 1990s and 2000s, bold bathroom hues were slowly wiped away, replaced by whites, grays, and beige. Still, those vivid bathroom suites had a kind of joy to them. They made you feel something, even if that something was confusion. And if the color did not impress you, the next home feature definitely would, especially if you ever hated carrying a heavy laundry basket down the stairs. Carrying toy guns that looked real was another everyday thing that would have kids in handcuffs today. The plastic pistols and rifles were dark, heavy, and practically indistinguishable from the real thing. Kids strutted through neighborhoods waving them around, playing cops and robbers in broad daylight. Some kids even spray-painted them silver or black to make them look cooler, unknowingly making them even more realistic. They were tucked into belts, slung across backs, and pointed dramatically in mock standoffs on the front lawn. Parents laughed from porches while neighbors cheered on pretend shootouts. Kids played ambush in alleys and backyards, leaping out with toy rifles like mini soldiers. Nobody saw danger in it. It was just fun. No orange safety tips, no neon colors, just realistic weapons in the hands of 8-year-olds. Police drove by without stopping, parents barely glanced, and everyone laughed when mock shootouts broke out on the front lawn. Today, the same scene would trigger a SWAT response, but in the 1970s, it was just called playtime. Poor kids especially treasured them because a $2 toy meant hours of endless fun. Shoulder pads were not just a trend, they were a transformation. You could put on a blazer and suddenly feel like a corporate warrior, even if you were just headed to homeroom. The goal was to look powerful, confident, and vaguely like a football player on a job interview. From business suits to casual blouses, shoulder pads invaded every piece of clothing in the 1980s. You could not escape them. They were sewn in, velcroed on, or added as an afterthought to make your silhouette scream important. The bigger the pad, the better. Entire generations walked around with squared-off shoulders and structured poise, looking ready to charge into a boardroom or a runway. Some tried to remove them only to realize the entire shirt deflated without the padding. They were ridiculous, and we knew it, but they worked. You stood a little taller, felt a little braver, and if someone bumped into you in the hallway, your outfit absorbed the blow. Looking back now, they seem comically oversized, but at the time, they were armor, fashion armor. And for anyone who wore them, they were a reminder that style was not just about looking good, it was about looking like you meant business. Hand-me-down clothing told a story stitched in faded colors and stretched-out sleeves. In homes where money was tight, new clothes were a luxury reserved for Christmas or growth spurts too dramatic to ignore. Everything else? Hand-me-downs, jeans worn thin at the knees, shirts a size too big, coats that smelled like someone else's winter. You learned to cuff sleeves and roll pant legs. You got good at pretending it was your style all along. Sometimes it came from older siblings, sometimes from cousins or neighbors. There was no shame at home, it was just life. But at school, it was different. Kids noticed. They asked where you got it. Or worse, they recognized it from someone else's closet. You laughed it off, or changed the subject, or just said nothing at all. You knew every patch, every stain, every repair your mom made after dinner. These clothes had been through it, just like you. And maybe they were not fashionable, maybe they sagged or pinched or hung wrong, but they lasted. And for families with more love than money, hand-me-downs were not second best. They were just what came next. And they carried you through, one button at a time. Commercial jingles in the 1980s were not just background noise. They were the soundtrack of your childhood. Short, catchy, and borderline hypnotic. From "I do not want to grow up, I am a Toys R Us kid," to my buddy, wherever I go, he goes." These little songs became national earworms. You knew the tune before you even understood the product. And even now, decades later, you probably remember all the lyrics without trying. Fast food chains, toys, theme songs for cereal, they all knew how to brand themselves right into your brain. And we loved it. These were not just ads. They were pop culture. Kids would sing them on the playground like they were chart-topping hits. Some even had dance routines. And the best ones? They felt like a little burst of joy in between the shows you came to watch. It was marketing, sure, but it was also magic. A 30-second clip that made you beg your parents for action figures, Happy Meals, or the latest sugary snack with a weird mascot. And yes, even today, if you hear the opening note of "Gimme a break, gimme a break," you know exactly what is coming. But when it came to making your own mix of hits, that required serious patience and a strong dislike for chatty radio DJs. It is one of those things you barely notice until it slides into action: pocket doors. Unlike the typical swinging door, pocket doors vanish into the wall when opened, like a magic trick you can walk through. They were the height of clever home design in the mid-20th century, especially in homes that wanted a clean, modern look without bulky doors breaking up the space. You would find them separating dining rooms from kitchens or closing off formal living rooms when company arrived. Over time, though, they became a pain. The tracks jammed, the rollers squeaked, and once one went off its rail, good luck fixing it without tearing open the wall. Slowly, builders turned back to swing doors, and pocket doors became a quirky throwback. But if those walls could talk, they would whisper about family dinners, polite goodbyes, and the satisfaction of sliding a whole room out of sight. Now, speaking of questionable style choices, wait until we step into the softest, strangest room in the house: the bathroom. Leaving kids alone in the car while grocery shopping was completely normal. Parents parked in the lot, told the kids to stay put, and disappeared inside for 20 minutes or more. Windows rolled up, sun blazing, kids fidgeted in sticky vinyl seats with nothing but a sibling squabble to pass the time. Some kids climbed into the driver's seat and pretended to steer, honking the horn until everyone jumped. Others pressed their faces against the glass, making goofy expressions at passers-by. The smell of vinyl mixed with sweat and half-melted crayons in the glove box was unforgettable. Some lucky kids fiddled with the radio, spinning the dial until static filled the air. The less lucky ones were stuck staring at the parking lot clock, waiting for mom to come back with groceries. Sometimes parents even left the keys in the ignition with the radio on, turning the car into a makeshift babysitter. Older siblings assumed command, but arguments usually erupted within minutes. Today, Child Protective Services would be called before mom even reached the produce aisle. But in the 70s, it was just another way families got errands done. Over-the-top hairdos in the 1980s were less about style and more about spectacle. To get that perfect towering poof or side-swept shell, you needed a can of hairspray in one hand and a teasing comb in the other. Some mornings, the bathroom turned into a construction site. Hair was sprayed, scrunched, fluffed, and frozen into place like a sculpture that dared not move. Mousse was slathered on like sunscreen, followed by heat from a curling iron so hot it could leave permanent dents in your bangs. It was a daily battle between gravity and vanity usually won. The bigger the hair, the closer to cool. Class photos from the decade show clouds of bangs, mile-high ponytails, and helmets of blonde that could survive a wind tunnel. Everyone walked around smelling faintly of aerosol. Some kids were practically flammable, but at the time, it was worth it. You judged your popularity by the size of your bangs. A flat head was social suicide. Looking back now, it seems absurd, but for those who lived it, there was no higher compliment than being told your hair looked totally rad. Homemade school lunches in washed-out containers were the unofficial lunchbox of every frugal family. Forget the cartoon thermos or the shiny metal lunch pail. If you were poor in the 1980s, your sandwich came wrapped in wax paper and packed in an empty margarine tub. Maybe the lid said country crock, but inside was leftover spaghetti or peanut butter crackers. You used the same container every day. The label peeled, the edges warped, but it worked. Your drink? Not a juice box. Maybe a reused jelly jar with watered-down Kool-Aid. You prayed it did not leak. In the lunchroom, You sat next to kids with perfectly packed snacks, cheese sticks, pudding cups, chips with real logos. You ate quietly, or fast, or not at all. But at home, it made sense. Those containers stacked neatly in the cupboard. Your parents washed them each night and packed them again with care. It was not about shame. It was about stretching every cent. And even though you knew it was different, you also knew it was made with effort, maybe even love. Those stained lids and handwritten notes stuffed under the sandwich were signs of sacrifice. And now, all grown up, they feel like something you miss. Saturday morning cartoons were not just shows. They were rituals. You would wake up at 6 or 7, bowl of cereal in hand, and stake out your spot in front of the television before anyone else in the house even stirred, pajamas still on, eyes still half shut. But you were ready. The networks fought hard for your attention. ABC, NBC, CBS, they all rolled out animated powerhouses like The Smurfs, He-Man, The Real Ghostbusters, Gem, G.I. Joe, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Each show had its slot, and missing one felt like missing a holiday. But for every golden episode came the heartbreak of your favorite show being bumped, or worse, replaced. The dreaded special news report could interrupt your flow like a slap to the face. You would sit there in disbelief as your cartoon got pulled for a political debate or weather update. No warnings, no mercy. Still, the lineup gave you something to look forward to all week, and for those few hours, everything felt right in the world. Cartoons, cereal, and commercials that somehow got stuck in your head forever. Because let's be honest, there are still jingles from that era that we can sing from memory, word for word. Back in the days when phones had cords and privacy was a privilege, every hallway had a throne, and it was called the gossip bench. This was not just a chair, it was a hybrid masterpiece, a small wooden seat attached to a side table, designed specifically for long, dramatic phone calls. These benches were often placed right by the hallway phone nook, and if you were a teenager in the 1960s or 1970s, this was your favorite spot in the house. You would sit there for hours, twirling the phone cord, whispering about crushes, repeating, "No, you hang up," while your siblings paced in the background waiting for their turn. Some benches had a little drawer for pens and paper. Others had cushions and floral fabric, showing just how serious folks were about comfort during those marathon chats. It was furniture that served one purpose: conversation. But as phones got smaller, and then wireless, and then fit in your pocket, the gossip bench faded away. Today, they are vintage novelties. Back then, they were the nerve center of the household. And while you chatted away about school dances or new neighbors, something else might have been happening overhead. Quietly, from the ceiling, playing your favorite song. Imagine this. It is Sunday morning. You are eating breakfast, and faintly from above your head comes the sweet hum of big band music or the evening news. Smoking in restaurants with the kids at the table was an everyday sight. Families sat in red vinyl booths, pancakes stacked high, while mom puffed on a Marlboro between bites. Ashtrays filled with cigarette butts sat beside the syrup pitcher. The air was so thick with smoke you could barely see the neon signs on the wall. Kids stirred straws through chocolate milk as ash drifted lazily past their faces. Sometimes the smoke clung to pancakes before the syrup even hit the table. Ashtrays filled faster than coffee cups, forcing waitresses to swap them out mid-meal. The smell of bacon, coffee, and cigarettes mixed into one unforgettable diner perfume. Children learned to tune out coughing fits while chomping on waffles. For adults, it was considered atmosphere, not a hazard. Waitresses balanced trays of food in one hand and flicked ashes with the other, all while keeping a smile. The clink of forks mixed with the tap of lighters as diners sparked up without hesitation. To kids, the smoky haze became as normal as the smell of bacon and coffee. Sometimes smoke curled into a child's face, and they coughed before taking another forkful of eggs. Waitresses served food with one hand and balanced a cigarette in the other. It sounds unthinkable now, but in the 70s, smoke-filled diners were the heartbeat of family outings. The idea of smoking sections did not exist. Every table was a smoking table. We just laughed our way through the funniest failed fads of the 1970s, so drop a comment with the one you remember or survived. Give this video a like if it made you grin, and subscribe so you never miss another blast of retro madness.